They said she was mad. Others said she was cursed, forgotten, or simply delusional. But for 20 years, no matter the weather or the headlines, she sat on the same low stool under the mango tree outside the Surulere magistrate court, watching and waiting in silence. Nobody knew why. This is not just a story about Mama Teni. It is a story about truth, memory, and resilience. It is a story that reminds us that silence is not surrender, and truth, even though buried, will always find a way to speak. Outside the Surulere magistrate court, just past the rusted black gate and before the parking lot, there was a mango tree. And under it, every day without fail, sat Mama Teni. She wore the same faded Ankara wrapper. She had a small blue cooler beside her and a leather-bound Bible in her lap. Sometimes she spoke. Most times she didn't. The court staff knew her. "She's always here," a cleaner whispered. "I think she lost someone in a case," the gatekeeper replied. Lawyers in suits brushed past her. No one would ask her anything. Day in, day out, she waited and waited and waited. Nobody remembered when she started coming. Some said 5 years ago after a trial involving land. Others said her son was arrested and she was waiting for him to be released. But nobody ever knew for sure or really asked. She arrived at dawn, swept under the mango tree herself, opened her cooler, sat with her Bible, waited, even when it rained. She once told a hawker, "I am not here for a person, I am here for a cause." The hawker laughed awkwardly and walked away. People thought she had lost her mind. But what they didn't know was that Mama Teni used to own the very land the court was built on. Years ago, she lived with her husband and only son in a modest bungalow in Surulere, right where the court complex now stands. The land had belonged to her late father, inherited and registered. Then one day, a powerful developer, backed by local politicians, came with bulldozers. They claimed the land was earmarked for public use. Her husband tried to fight them, but he was arrested for assaulting a government agent. He died weeks later in detention. Her only son, Teni, tried to petition the courts. He vanished 2 days before the first hearing. They called it a kidnapping. The case was silenced after a week or so. No suspect, no progress. The case was quietly dismissed. Mama Teni was broken. She had lost everything. Even though she lost hope in the system, she believed that someday justice would be served. And so she waited. Years later, a new chief magistrate, Justice Olawale, began to hear murmurs about the Rapa woman by the mango tree, as she was called. One day he walked over to her himself. "Madam, why are you always here?" he asked softly. She didn't speak. She just handed him an old folded black and white photograph of her family in front of a now demolished house. "They said I'm mad," she whispered, "but I remember every brick of that home, and I remember the judge who signed away our land like it was nothing." The magistrate looked at her, the court building, and then at the gate where the official plaque hung, with the name of the developer carved in bronze. He paused. He had heard that name before, and then he realized. The land acquisition file for this court had always been missing from the Lagos archives. Justice Olawale couldn't sleep that night. The woman's photograph haunted him, not just because of the faded faces, but because of the date scrawled on the back, March 1999. That was the same year the land registry files had mysteriously disappeared from the Lagos archives. He asked his registrar to locate the original land acquisition file. 3 days passed, then the response came. "Sir, that file has no trace in the current system, no digital record, no hard copy either." The wall of silence had already begun. He called the Ministry of Lands. They promised to get back to him, but they didn't. When he pushed again, he received a threat call from an anonymous number. "Be careful, Oga. That woman's land?" The caller added, "That matter, Don. Swallow plenty people before you. He fit swallow you too." That same evening, someone left a blank envelope on his car windshield, containing a yellowed newspaper clipping from 2001. Youth's protest over missing activist, last seen in police custody after petitioning land grab. At the bottom was a grainy black and white photo. It was Teni, Mama's son, young, bold, holding a petition file in his hands outside the same Surulere court. Justice Olawale sat in his office long after dark. Beside him sat Barrister Ada, the junior lawyer he trusted most. "Sir," she said cautiously, "I visited the old Ikoyi archives myself. You won't believe what I found." She placed two files on his desk. One was the original land deed, Mama Teni's father's name still clear on the header, and the other was a confidential police memo from 2001. Subject: transfer of suspect Teni Oluwakemi to CID, marked for political review, hold for inquiry, file closed. No follow-up and no closure, just red ink. Oluwale clenched his jaw. "This is unbelievable." The next day, instead of waiting for approval, he wrote a personal letter. Not to the police, not to the ministry either, but to the Human Rights Commission and a journalist he knew from his university days. 2 weeks later, headlines exploded across social media and newspapers. Lagos court built on stolen land, hidden history of the woman at the gate. Exclusive, 2001 disappearance of land rights activist linked to high court corruption. Who is Mama Teni? The 20-year wait for justice. The public outcry was massive. Activists stormed the court. Mama Teni never said much. She just sat under her tree, clutching her Bible like always. That morning, the crowd was restless. Protest banners fluttered, and journalists set up mics outside the court gates. The Human Rights Commission had launched a full inquiry into the 2001 land grab. Mama Teni was there again, sitting under the mango tree. Justice Olawale approached slowly. He'd spent all night reading the report from the newly uncovered police memo, and what he found broke him. He knelt beside her and whispered, "Mama, I have to tell you the truth." She turned, calm but alert. "We found a witness, a retired officer. He confessed Teni was detained the night before his petition was to be heard. They moved him to CID custody. There was a scuffle in the cell where he was, and he died in custody. He was never charged, and he was buried in an unmarked grave outside Ikorodu. No family was ever notified." The air went still. A breeze moved through the mango leaves. Mama didn't cry. She simply sighed. "I knew," she said. Olawale looked up, stunned. "You knew?" She nodded slowly. "Not at first, but after the second year. I stopped waiting for him to walk out. I just kept coming so they'd never forget his name. If I stopped coming, it would be like he never existed." She reached into her Bible and handed Olawale a faded petition, signed Oluwakemi Teni, her son's original. "He wanted the truth to be seen in court. I came here so one day someone like you would take it inside." Olawale took it with shaking hands. "I'll submit it today, officially, in his name." Mama Teni smiled, a small, tired smile. Then for the first time in 20 years, she stood without waiting. She didn't need to anymore. The news of Teni's death hit the city hard. His story trended on social media. TV stations ran specials. Human rights lawyers dug up 3 other similar disappearances from the early 2000s. Mama Teni didn't speak to the press. 1 week later, Justice Olawale received a letter from the Office of the Attorney General. The government was launching a state inquiry into wrongful deaths in detention, and Teni's name would be the first on the list. "We will honor him publicly," the letter read, "and review the land he died fighting for." At a packed court hearing weeks later, Justice Olawale read Teni's original petition aloud, word for word. Mama Teni sat in the front row. When he finished, the room stood in silence. Then the judge spoke. "This court hereby acknowledges that the petitioner, Mr. Teni Oluwakemi, died pursuing a lawful claim, and that his actions sparked a movement that has now reached this bench." The court passed a ruling that the land would be restored, her son's death would be honored, and the court building itself would be renamed the Teni Justice Complex in his memory. She didn't get to hug him again. She didn't get to watch him grow old, but she gave him something greater, the justice he was denied in life. And now every case heard in that court bears his name. She waited not for pity, but for the day the world would remember her son stood for truth. And finally, she got his voice heard. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll, like, share, and subscribe to AfroKingdom. We bring you real stories with real lessons, straight from the soul of Africa. Every tale carries truth, hope, and wisdom. Join the tribe. Let's keep our stories alive.